Hi, everyone, and welcome back to a Criminally Basic podcast. My name is Megan.
And I'm Hannah.
And today we are going over another unsolved case.
We love unsolved cases here.
I really like covering unsolved cases. It really fascinates me how one person's case can blow up on national news and another person's case can be seemingly completely forgotten about. Now, I know some of who is and isn't covered in the media has a lot to do with money and privilege. I'm totally not denying that. But when it comes to cases that I want to do more research on, I typically can't help but wonder what makes this case different from one that makes national headlines. Why, before diving into the FBI's database, had I never heard of 4 women, all from the same town of Lumberton, North Carolina, mysteriously disappearing and 3 of them later turning up deceased? Well, the resources and articles from these 4 women's disappearances and murders are few and far between. I'm going to do my best to piece together what happened to them and who the perpetrator or perpetrators might be. Today, we're heading to Lumberton to find out what happened to Rhonda Jones, Kristin Bennett, Megan Oxendine, and Abby Patterson. My research started on the FBI's most wanted kidnapped and missing persons list. There, I found Abby Patterson listed among the countless other faces. Initially, I was drawn to her because her picture looked bright and happy. She was born on February 15th, 1997, which makes her just a few months older than I am. She and I have similar brown hair and a similar complexion, although, side note from her photos, it does look like she was a little bit more tan than I am because everyone is a little bit more tan than I am.
Literally, if you see me and Megan, everyone is more tan than us.
Yeah. Overall, she just struck me as really similar to myself. When I scrolled down to read more about her disappearance, I was met with a pretty vague description, which I'll read for you now. Quote, Patterson was last seen on September 5th, 2017, around 11:30 a.m. She left her home on East 9th Street in Lumberton, North Carolina, and was seen getting into a brown Buick. Patterson has not been seen since and has not had any contact with friends or family. End quote. According to a WBTW article, as well as a page on the Charlie Project's website, Abby was 20 years old when she went missing in Lumberton. Just a few days prior, she had returned home from Florida, where she'd been in rehab to treat a heroin addiction. There weren't any reports saying whether or not she completed the program, but I would think that it would be explicitly stated if she had left against the advice of the medical professionals at the rehab facility, so we can assume that she had completed the program. After leaving Florida, she had returned home to live with her mother, named Samantha Lovett. On that fateful December day, according to the same WBTW article, Abby left around 11:30 a.m. to run some errands. Neighbors saw her getting into a brown Buick sedan, which drove off. Nia Watson, who's a writer for WMBF News in Lumberton, reported in an article written a year after Abby's disappearance that Samantha, Abby's mom, got a text from Abby at 11:38 saying that she would be gone for about an hour. But as the day wore on, her mom got more and more worried. She reportedly tried to call her several times throughout the day, but each one went straight to voicemail. At 6 o'clock that evening, a missing persons report was filed.
Thank God they didn't wait 24 hours.
Now, I couldn't find much of anything stating how the report was treated by investigators when it was filed, but I do know that Abby's history of drug use was mentioned in the report. Unfortunately, people who abuse drugs are at a high risk for going missing for a number of reasons. In Abby's case, she was just out of rehab, which is a really dangerous time for recovering addicts since they're on their own and can make their own decisions, and the temptation to just have one more drink, just take one more hit is way higher than it typically has been.
Yeah. I hate how even if, yes, you have a past and yes, you've gotten clean, the police or whoever will still somewhat use that against you during these reports.
Absolutely. I mean, all too often a recovering addict will relapse away from their home if they're living with people because they don't want to be found while they're not sober. And many of them do end up resurfacing alive, but there are those who relapse and subsequently overdose because their bodies can't handle the amount of drugs that they were used to taking before.
Yeah.
The police did follow up on a number of leads that came up during the investigation. They actually did find the driver of the Buick, who, according to the Charlie Project's website, knew her, but said that they dropped her off somewhere else. Police haven't revealed where that somewhere else is, but they do know where this person said they dropped her off. And I'm assuming that this person has been cleared of suspicion, though I couldn't verify that. Unfortunately, that's all we know about Abby's disappearance. However, once she went missing, it didn't take long for people to start comparing her disappearance to those of 3 other women from Lumberton. According to an ABC 15 news article by Tanya Brown, in the months leading up to Abby's disappearance, the bodies of Rhonda Jones, Kristin Bennett, who goes by Kristin, and Megan Oxendine had all been found naked and within close proximity to each other. And by close proximity, I mean close. Rhonda and Kristin's bodies were found on the same day, 50 yards from each other, and Megan's body was found 2 blocks away from where the original 2 were found.
Okay, when you said close, Megan, I thought, oh, within a few miles of each other, not 50 feet from each other.
50 yards.
Oh, 50 yards, I'm sorry. But, like, still, though.
No, they were found across the street.
That's crazy, but also very bold of this killer to be like, gonna dump one here, gonna dump one there.
Yeah. Rhonda was found on the same day as 32-year-old Kristin, which was April 18th, 2017, stuffed into a trash can outside of a home.
Oh my God.
Inside that home, they found Kristin's body as well. Both Rhonda and Kristin had suffered with drug abuse, but friends and family say that 36-year-old Rhonda, quote, was not just some common drug addict off the street, end quote. An ABC 15 news article by Rosalia Federa stated that Rhonda actually had 5 children and a grandchild at the time of her death. Unfortunately, according to Rhonda and Kristin's families, they were met with an all too common response from law enforcement when it comes to investigating suspicious deaths of people dealing with a drug addiction. According to prisonreports.org, the families felt as though the Lumberton police just kind of shrugged them off. The house that Kristin was found in was known as a spot for illegal activity, and the bodies were in such a state of decay and decomposition that a cause of death could not accurately be determined. However, the families of Rhonda and Kristin are sure that foul play was involved, especially considering that Rhonda's body was found in a trash can.
Yeah, there's no way a suicide you would stuff yourself in a trash can and be like, okay, that's it, I'm going out like that.
No, and even an accidental overdose. I can't think of a situation in which you would be found in a trash can. And I only found this in one article, so I didn't end up actually putting it in my script, but the way that her body was in the trash can, it reportedly was not a way that you could put yourself in it while you're still alive.
Unless you were like a contortionist.
Right. And again, I didn't put this in the article, so please take this with a grain of salt. I could only find this one place, and I mean, not to mention that both of them were not clothed.
Yeah.
So don't quote me on this, but according to just one source that I found, Ron's body was apparently like upside down in the trash can, which to me, it doesn't seem like a position that someone who, maybe is high on a substance could naturally get into. The families also brought up another really common question that comes up. Had Rhonda and Kristin been wealthy white women, would their disappearances and deaths have been treated with the same apparent apathy? Yes, they were struggling with addiction, but that doesn't make their lives any less valuable and the circumstances of their death any less suspicious, because someone had to have put Rhonda in that trash can, someone had to have taken their clothes off, someone had to have known where they were and how they died, and who's responsible for those deaths.
If they were white, I don't want to say it would be solved, but I feel like we would know more.
The frustrating thing about these cases is that there's just not much to go on. Yeah. Because, I mean, there are cases that do blow up in the news because of poor investigations. And, this isn't one of them. There aren't many details about the investigation, so I don't feel like I can make a comment from the perspective of me.
Yeah.
But I can report on what their families have said that they have experienced.
Yeah.
And according to their families, they have really questioned if their race, the color of their skin, has anything to do with their cases still not being solved. there's so many different layers to this case. There's the drug abuse layer, there's the race layer. We do have these unconscious biases. Everyone has unconscious biases that make them treat people differently.
Yeah, and some may be more severe than others.
Some may be more conscious than
Yeah,
others.
true.
And I mean, unfortunately, you do run into the issue of you can't just solve a case if there's no evidence there to solve it with. Their bodies were in such a state of decay that they couldn't determine a cause of death. And I mean, that's really unfortunate. I think the question more so comes up if
They had taken it, the police had taken it serious sooner.
and see, I can't comment on if the police took it seriously or not because there's just not much
There's
out
no
there.
evidence. Yeah.
When their bodies were originally found, they did get some local coverage, which is great, but unfortunately, we are at a state where you can't help but question if their circumstances were just a tiny bit different, if there could have been a different outcome. And maybe that outcome wouldn't be that they're alive, but maybe the outcome would be that we know what happened.
Yeah.
On a side note, actually, that same prismreports.org article that I referenced earlier does a fantastic job of explaining the plight of missing people of color when it comes to reporting and investigation. So I highly recommend going to read it because, quite frankly, it does a far better job of laying out the multiple layers of this issue than I ever could. In the wake of Kristin and Rhonda's murders, Rhonda's friend, 28-year-old Megan Oxendine, was interviewed by CBS North Carolina. You can actually watch that interview on YouTube, and knowing that she is one of the women who ends up dead in this story is chilling. Just a few months later, her body would be found behind a house just 2 blocks from where the original 2 were discovered. Like Rhonda and Kristin, Megan also suffered from drug addiction. Her mother, Sheila, theorized that she knew something about the deaths from just the way that she spoke about them. In another ABC News article, she said, quote, "I think Megan knows something from the way Megan talked. I don't know how much she knew, whether it's a little something, who had something to do with it, or actually done it," end quote.
That's not just chilling. That's so, I don't want to say weird, but it's creepy.
It is creepy, and there's something that is so unsettling about watching people on video, seeing them move, hearing them speak, and knowing that they're no longer alive. It's unsettling. According to her mother from that same article, Megan had actually been attacked by an unknown assailant just a few weeks after Rhonda and Kristin were found.
Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm. Sheila said, quote, "My child came up here 3 to 4 weeks ago and had been attacked. 2 officers know that night, and that's why one of the officers got on the phone with the detective for the 2 other girls, and he said he would call me in 2 days. I've never heard from him. Megan was still alive, but now she's not," end quote.
Well then, not saying that's good detective work or anything, but
Yeah, I think that right there just kind of sums it up, doesn't it?
yeah, it does.
When analyzing all 4 cases together, investigators are pretty confident that Abby's case is not connected to those of Rhonda, Kristin, and Megan. It's said that there are a few similarities, but the elements of their cases that are similar are generic enough to not point in any conclusive direction. However, all 4 of these cases still remain unsolved. So, if you or anyone you know has any information that could bring closure to the families that lost their mothers, daughters, and sisters, please call the Lumberton Police Department at 910-671-3845.
It just seems too eerily connected for it just to be a random coincidence.
I personally believe that Rhonda, Kristin, and Megan's cases are all connected. I don't think that Abby's is, just because, yeah, there are similarities with their histories of drug use, but the kind of way that they went missing was different.
Yeah.
Police have purposefully not released a lot of information in Abby's case, like where she was dropped off, for instance.
Yeah. As much as we like to play amateur detectives from our couch, some people will actually go play amateur detective in real life, and that might not be the best idea.
Right. I do think that since they are, at least from what I saw, actively analyzing this case and actively trying to solve it, that could be information that leads to the arrest of the person who's responsible for her disappearance. Thank you for listening to a Criminally Basic podcast. If you want to learn more, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at a Criminally Basic podcast.
And check out our sources as well as photos on our website, www.acriminallybasicpodcast.podbean.com.
Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.